Tessa Owens shoved her keys into her purse, grabbed her daughter's forgotten science project off the kitchen counter, and dashed to her aging Honda, muttering, "I swear, if I miss this meeting." The school parking lot was already half full when she arrived, and her heels clicked frantically across the sidewalk as she rushed toward the glass doors of Willow Heights Academy. Her blouse was wrinkled, her ponytail was falling apart, and she was 10 minutes late to her daughter's first parent-teacher meeting of the year. She pushed into the classroom with a breathless, "Hi. Sorry. Traffic," and froze just inside the door. There, seated across from Ms. Rizzo, was a man in a tailored navy suit, one leg crossed over the other, his watch glinting under the fluorescent lights. His expression was unreadable, his jaw sharp, his presence commanding. He turned his head slowly, eyes meeting hers with a spark of curiosity. Tessa blinked. "Ms. Owens?" the teacher asked with a polite smile, gesturing toward the empty chair beside the man. "We were just talking about Lila and Liam's science project." Tessa dropped into the seat without looking at him. "Right, the volcano." "Sorry I'm late." "No problem," the man said, his voice smooth, low, and confident. "I'm Maddox Langston, Liam's father." Of course he was. She glanced at him now, really looked, and her stomach did something stupid. He was way too put together for a Wednesday night at a school. His shoes were polished, his cufflinks sparkled, and his cologne was subtle but expensive. He looked like he belonged in a boardroom, not a second-grade classroom. She offered a tight smile. "Tessa Owens, Lila's mom." He held her gaze a moment too long. "Nice to meet you." Ms. Rizzo cleared her throat. "As I was saying, their project was one of the best in the class. They worked well together." Tessa exhaled, thankful for the distraction. Her daughter had been raving about Liam for weeks. Apparently he was the coolest boy in class, which usually meant he shared his crayons and didn't eat glue. They finished the meeting in 20 minutes. Maddox stood when she did, towering over her. "Do you have a few minutes?" he asked suddenly. Tessa blinked. Sure. Just outside. I'd like to talk about the kids." She followed him out into the hallway, trying not to focus on how he walked like he owned the place. Once they were out of earshot, he turned to her. "Lila's a great kid. Liam talks about her constantly." Tessa smiled. "That's sweet. Lila's obsessed with him. I've heard more about Liam than I ever needed to." He laughed lightly, and the sound made her heart race for no good reason. "I was thinking," Maddox continued, "maybe we could take them out one weekend, let them hang out outside of school. A museum or something." She hesitated. "Like, all four of us. Unless you'd rather I just take them alone?" "No," she said quickly. "That's not. Yeah, sure. That could be nice." He nodded once, then pulled something from his inside jacket pocket. A business card. She took it, eyes catching on the name of a private investment firm at the top. Langston Capital Group. "Oh," she said without thinking. "You're that Langston." He raised a brow. "You've heard of it? I saw something about it on the news last year. You're a millionaire." "Technically, a few times over," he said, completely casual. Tessa stared at him. "And your kid goes to public school?" He smiled. "I don't believe in hiding from reality. I want Liam to have a normal life." She didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded. "I'll let you go," Maddox said, stepping back. "Text me when you're free. I'll set something up for the kids." "Okay." She tucked the card into her purse. "Good night." "Good night, Tessa." She walked back to her car feeling like she'd just stepped through a door into a completely different world. The next Saturday, Maddox invited them to meet at the Natural History Museum. Tessa dressed Lila in her favorite jeans and grabbed her own nicest blouse, the one without a stain on it. When they arrived, Maddox was already there with Liam, both of them waiting at the steps. He wore a charcoal jacket and sunglasses, hands in his pockets. He looked like something out of a movie. "Hey," he greeted, smiling warmly. "Glad you made it." Tessa nodded, trying not to feel underdressed. The kids have been counting down since Wednesday. He looked down at Lila. You ready to see some dinosaurs? Lila giggled and nodded, then grabbed Liam's hand and pulled him toward the entrance. They followed behind the kids, and Maddox leaned in slightly as they walked. You okay with me paying for today? She opened her mouth to protest, but he held up a hand. Please, I invited you. I want to. Fine, she said reluctantly. But I'm buying lunch. He chuckled. Deal. Inside, he surprised her again. He wasn't just throwing money around. He was attentive, kind to the kids, asked thoughtful questions. He didn't check his phone once. At lunch, he picked an upscale cafe just across the street. I'm used to fast food, she said, glancing at the menu. Then let me spoil you, he replied easily. Tessa looked up. Something in the way he said it made her chest tighten. He wasn't flirting. Not exactly, but it was something. By the time the day ended, the kids were exhausted, and so was she. Maddox walked them to her car and helped Lila buckle in. Thanks for today, Tessa said, turning to him. I enjoyed it, he replied. His gaze dropped to her lips for a fraction of a second before returning to her eyes. We should do it again. Yeah, she said a little breathlessly. We should. He gave her a small, private smile. I'll call you. She drove home in silence, her heart doing things it hadn't done in years. This wasn't just about the kids anymore, and she wasn't sure she was ready for what that meant. Tessa adjusted her cardigan as she stepped into the Langston Hotel lobby, trying to ignore the way the doorman subtly straightened at her approach. He gave her a respectful nod but didn't ask her name. Maddox had already left instructions. The marble floors gleamed beneath her shoes, and the massive chandelier overhead reflected in the polished surfaces like a starburst. She'd never been inside a hotel like this before, and it felt like walking through a dream, one that didn't belong to her. She'd hesitated all morning about coming. Maddox had invited her and Lila for Sunday brunch, saying it was just something casual. No pressure, he'd said, like inviting someone to a place where the valet wore white gloves was normal. But Lila had been thrilled at the idea of seeing Liam again, and Tessa, despite every instinct to keep her distance, had said yes. A concierge guided her to an elevator without asking a single question, and soon she was stepping into a private dining suite on the 27th floor. The view snatched her breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked over the entire city, the skyline bathed in morning sunlight. Whoa, Lila whispered beside her. Yeah, Tessa murmured, tightening her grip on her daughter's hand. Maddox stood by the window holding a small plate of fruit, his jacket off and sleeves rolled up. Liam was already seated at the long table, munching on pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. You made it, Maddox said with a warm smile. It wasn't exactly hard to find, she replied, keeping her tone light. The doorman may have bowed. I told them not to go overboard. Right, she said dryly. Because this is so subtle. He chuckled and motioned to the table. Sit. They've got everything: French toast, waffles, eggs, you name it. And there's fresh squeezed juice, if that's your thing. Tessa helped Lila into a chair and tried not to gawk at the spread. The plates were porcelain, the silverware heavy in her hands. She'd never eaten off anything that didn't come in a paper bag on a Sunday morning. As they ate, Maddox leaned toward her. So, what do you do when you're not sprinting into classrooms carrying volcano projects? She wiped her mouth and set her napkin down. I work at a publishing distribution warehouse. I manage the inventory, mostly textbooks. Do you like it? It pays the bills. That's not what I asked. Tessa tilted her head. No one's ever really asked me that. I'm not no one. It wasn't flotation. It was a statement. One that held weight. I used to want to write, she said after a pause. But life happens. And stories don't pay for rent. Not at first, he said, his gaze steady. But stories are why people build empires. You should write again. She looked away before he could see how much that suggestion shook her. No one had said something like that to her in years. When the children finished eating, Maddox arranged for 2 attendants from the hotel's childcare program, both background checked and certified, to take them to the play lounge on the floor below. Tessa hesitated, but Liam clung to Lila's hand and both kids looked thrilled. "They'll be fine," Maddox said. "The staff here is top tier." She nodded. "Okay, just for a little while." Once they were gone, Maddox poured her a second cup of coffee and leaned forward. "I know this is different for you. You think." He smiled faintly. "I've spent time with people who expect this." "You don't." She snorted gently. "No, I don't. I'm not used to brunches with tablecloths and someone clearing the plates before I can reach for the syrup. And yet you're handling it better than half the CEOs I've had to wine and dine." She eyed him. "You always this charming, or is this a special occasion? I don't waste time on people I'm not interested in." Her pulse jumped. "So this is what? Interest?" "Very much so." She leaned back, crossing her arms over her chest. "Maddox, we barely know each other, which is why I want to change that. And you think a few pancakes and a skyline view is going to make me forget that our lives don't have anything in common?" "No," he said calmly. "But I think you're a woman who doesn't let fear stop her. And I think you're not used to someone actually listening when you speak." Tessa stared at him. "You don't even know what I've been through." "You're right. I don't. Yet." She stood, needing space. The windows pulled her toward them, the entire city unfurling below. She felt small here, but not in the way that diminished her. More like she was standing at the edge of something bigger than she'd ever imagined. He came to stand beside her. "Tell me what you need, Tessa." She turned her head toward him. "I need to know this isn't just some game for you, that you're not doing this because you're bored or because Lila and Liam get along. I don't do anything halfway." He paused. "Especially not when it comes to people I care about." Her breath caught. "Care? Already? I don't move slowly. You'll learn that about me." She swallowed. "You don't even know if I've got baggage." "I assume you do. Everyone does. I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking for a chance." Behind them, the elevator chimed. The children had returned, their laughter echoing down the hall. She didn't answer as she stepped back from the window, but something in her had shifted. Maddox didn't try to push further. He just handed her Lila's small backpack, helped Liam into his coat, and walked them out with nothing more than a quiet, "See you soon." And as Tessa buckled Lila into her booster seat and closed the car door, she realized her heart was racing in a way that had nothing to do with nerves. She wasn't falling. Not yet. But something had begun. Something real. Tessa stood just outside the bookstore entrance, blinking into the early dusk. The air carried the bite of late autumn and the breeze tugged loose strands of hair from her braid. She checked her watch again. Maddox was late. She wasn't sure why that surprised her. Men like him weren't known for punctuality. They had empires to run, meetings to take, and people who scheduled those meetings for them. But still, she'd expected something different. She reached for her phone, then paused as a sleek black SUV pulled to the curb. The door swung open and Maddox stepped out, coat unbuttoned, a pair of leather gloves in one hand. He crossed the sidewalk with long, purposeful strides. "Sorry," he said, voice low. "My morning derailed." "You're lucky I like bookstores," she said, folding her arms. "Or I'd have taken off 20 minutes ago." He reached for the door and held it open. "Then I'm lucky. Come on. You said you liked old poetry. I want to see what kind." Inside, the warmth hit her first, followed by the comforting scent of old paper and polished wood. Maddox had chosen the kind of place that didn't advertise its existence with neon signs or loyalty cards. It was quiet, beautifully curated, and clearly expensive. She wandered to a shelf marked Collected Works, running her fingers along the spines. Maddox stood beside her, not saying anything until she pulled out a slim blue volume with a faded gold title. "Dylan Thomas," he observed. "Good choice. I used to read this out loud in high school," she said, flipping it open. "I thought it made me sound deep." "Did it?" "Not even a little." He smiled without amusement and ran his thumb along the edge of the shelf. I used to skip English entirely. Thought I didn't need it. What changed? I spent a summer in Venice when I was 21. There was a woman. She quoted Neruda like it was gospel. I still don't remember her name, but I remember the poems. Tessa raised an eyebrow. That's oddly romantic. Don't tell the board, he said dryly. They like me ruthless. She tucked the book under her arm and turned toward the register. I'll pay for this one. I already told them to charge anything to the account, he said. She stared at him. You have a bookstore account? I have one everywhere I want to remember. She didn't know what that meant, so she said nothing. After the purchase, he led her upstairs to a small reading lounge. It overlooked the street, the lights casting golden reflections on the windows. There were only 2 chairs. He waited until she sat before taking the other. I'm not used to this, she said after a moment. Not just the money. The attention. He rested his forearms on his knees, watching her closely. You think I'm doing this for fun? I think you're used to getting what you want, she said. And you assume that makes me shallow. No, she said. But it makes me cautious. I get that. But I'm not looking for entertainment. I'm looking for something real. That's easy to say. Then let me show you. She looked at him, really looked. There was no arrogance in his posture now, no charm for the sake of it. Just a man with tired eyes and steady words. Why me, she asked quietly. There are women who'd kill for your attention, women with more time, better clothes, fewer complications. Because you don't chase, he said. Because you laugh when you're nervous and glare when you're overwhelmed. And because you've never once asked me for anything. I don't want to be someone you rescue. I don't want to rescue you, he said. I want to know you. She stared out the window. There's a difference between knowing someone and fitting into their life. I'm not asking you to fit into mine. I'm asking if I can fit into yours. She didn't speak. The silence stretched long, comfortable, and not. Finally, she turned back to him. What would that even look like? Dinner, he said. Just us. No kids. No expectations. I'd have to get a sitter. I've already arranged someone, he said. Lila will be with someone certified, vetted, and recommended by Ms. Rizzo. Tessa blinked. You went through the school? I didn't want to offer if it wasn't someone you trusted. She hesitated. And where would this dinner be? You'll see. She folded her hands in her lap. You really don't like giving straight answers, do you? He stood and extended a hand. Only when I already know the question matters. She took it. His palm was warm, steady, and when she stood, he didn't let go right away. That night, she dressed slowly. Not because she was trying to impress him, but because it mattered to her. She left Lila in the care of the woman Maddox had arranged, a soft-spoken woman who Lila instantly warmed to. When Tessa stepped outside, a different car waited, sleek, silver, low to the ground. The driver opened the door and she slid in, heart pounding. They drove through the city, but instead of heading toward the restaurants she knew, they climbed north toward the hills. After 20 minutes, the car pulled through iron gates and up a winding drive. Her breath caught. It wasn't a restaurant. It was a house, or rather, a modern glass and stone estate perched on a cliff, lit from the inside like a beacon. The driver opened her door, and she stepped out into the hush of pine trees and stars. Maddox waited at the entrance. No jacket this time, just a dark shirt, sleeves rolled, collar open. He looked almost human, like this, less billionaire, more man. You brought me to your house, she said, stunned. I wanted you to know where I come from. Her feet felt rooted to the stone path. Why? Because I'm not asking you to guess anymore. He held out his hand again. And this time she didn't hesitate. Tessa stepped into Maddox's home, her heels clicking softly against the polished concrete floor. The space was unlike anything she had ever seen. Clean lines, towering windows, and warm, ambient lighting that cast soft shadows across the marble counters and dark oak beams. Every detail was intentional, from the vertical garden stretching up one wall to the minimalist fireplace flickering in the center of the open living space. But none of it compared to the view. The far wall was entirely glass, revealing a vast stretch of the city below, glittering like a sea of stars. Tessa moved toward it instinctively, resting her fingertips on the cool glass. You live above everything, she murmured. Not everything, Maddox said from behind her. just high enough to breathe. She turned to him, and for once there was no cleverness in his voice. Just a man standing without pretense. He motioned toward the dining table near the window where a single-place setting had been laid at each end of a long, ebony table. Between them, low candles flickered beside a floral arrangement that looked freshly cut. "You set this up?" she asked, eyebrow raised. "I cook too," he said. "Try not to look so surprised." "You? Cooked? I'm not completely useless outside of a boardroom." She laughed, and he looked quietly pleased by the sound. They sat across from each other, and he poured her a glass of wine, deep red, smooth, and richer than anything she'd ever tasted. The meal that followed was simple but elegant. Lemon herb roasted chicken, wild rice with pine nuts, and charred broccolini drizzled with something citrusy she couldn't quite name. "This is amazing," she said between bites. "You really did this?" "I had help from my grandmother's recipe book," he admitted. "But yes, I needed tonight to be personal." "Why?" He set his fork down. "Because I've spent most of my life surrounded by people who want something from me. But you're the only one who ever made me want to give something back." Tessa's hands stilled on the napkin in her lap. "I'm not used to people saying things like that. I'm not used to feeling them," he replied. "But I meant it." They ate in silence for a few moments, not from awkwardness but from something heavier, something waiting beneath the surface. As dessert was cleared, a light panna cotta with fresh berries, he walked over to a low cabinet and pulled out a flat box. "I wasn't sure when to give you this," he said, returning to the table. "But now feels right." She looked at the box, hesitant. "What is it?" He slid it across the table. "Just open it." Inside, nestled in tissue, was a leather-bound journal. The cover was soft and worn, the pages thick and cream-colored. Hand-stitched along the spine were the initials T.O. "It's blank," she said softly, brushing her fingers over the pages. "For now," he said. "But I figured if you're ever ready to start writing again, you should have something worthy of your words." She looked up, throat tight. "You remembered." "I remember everything you say." Her eyes burned, and she blinked quickly, refusing to let the tears fall. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. Just know I see you." They sat in the hush of the room, the city glowing behind them, the journal resting between them like a promise. Later, he walked her to the balcony. The cold air brushed against her skin, but she didn't move. He stood beside her, hands in his pockets, eyes on the horizon. "Do you ever wonder if you're allowed to be happy?" she asked suddenly. "All the time," he said. "But then I met you. And I stopped wondering." She turned toward him, unsure if it was the wine or the night or the way he said it, but something inside her gave way. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of getting used to this. Of letting Lila care about someone who might not stay. I'm not going anywhere." "You can't promise that." "I can," he said, stepping closer. "I can promise you I'll fight for this. For both of you. I'm not interested in temporary. I want real. I want you." She studied him, every inch of her trembling with 100 unspoken questions. But only one rose to the surface. "What if I say yes?" she whispered. "Then everything changes." He leaned in, slowly, giving her every second to pull away. But she didn't. Their lips met, not urgently, not rushed, but with the kind of quiet certainty that came from two people who had waited their whole lives to be seen. The kiss was soft but anchored, a confession and a beginning all at once. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "You feel like home," he said. The next morning, Tessa woke in her apartment to the sound of Lila humming in the kitchen. The sitter had left a sweet note and a tray of muffins on the counter. Everything felt normal, yet different. She reached for the journal still tucked in her bag and ran her fingers over the cover. 3 days later, she met Maddox again, this time at the elementary school, where the kids had been cast as shepherds in a winter recital. The gymnasium was packed, and folding chairs squeaked as parents shifted in their seats. Maddox slid into the chair beside her, his coat dusted with snow. He leaned toward her, voice low. "I've been thinking about something. If it's about taking over the toy drive committee, I'm going to stop you right there." He chuckled. "No, it's about Lila." She tilted her head. "What about her?" "I want to be part of her life. Not just as Liam's dad. As someone she can depend on. Someone you both can. Tessa's heart beat faster, but she kept her voice steady. You're serious. I've never been more. She turned back to the stage, eyes stinging as Lila waved at her from behind a cardboard tree. After the performance, Maddox took them both to dinner. Nothing flashy, just a cozy Italian place near their building where Lila got spaghetti in the shape of a smiley face and Maddox let her order dessert first. 2 weeks later, he picked them up in a snow-dusted car and drove them to a small, private garden in the hills, one he'd rented just for the night. Hanging lanterns swung from the trees and a violinist played quietly near a fountain. Tessa looked at him, stunned. What is this? He opened a small box and held it out. I love you, he said. I love the way you fight for what matters. I love the way you make space for joy even when you're tired. I love the way Lila trusts you, and I want to be part of that world. Marry me. Tessa stared at the ring, then at him. And then at Lila, who beamed from beside a patch of orchids. She didn't say yes right away. She knelt and pulled her daughter close. What do you think, baby? Lila whispered, I think he makes you smile like sunshine. Tessa laughed, heartful, and stood. Yes, she said. Yes, Maddox Langston. We'll marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her like the world had finally tilted into place. And for the first time in her life, Tessa didn't wonder if happiness would last. She knew it would, because this time someone had chosen to stay. The ceremony was held in the rose garden behind Maddox's estate, just after the last snow of the season had melted. Pale green leaves peeked through the earth as if nature itself had paused to witness the moment. White chairs lined the stone path, filled with a blend of Tessa's closest friends and Maddox's carefully trimmed guest list. Even his assistant, Nora, had flown in from Singapore just to attend. Tessa stood beside the French doors, Lila fussing with the hem of her mother's dress, her small fingers tugging gently at the lace. Are you nervous? Lila asked, eyes wide. A little, Tessa admitted, smoothing a hand down her bodice. But in the best way. Lila gave a solemn nod, then held out the bouquet of white peonies and soft pink tulips. You look like a painting. Tessa swallowed a sudden rush of emotion and knelt, brushing her daughter's cheek. You're the best part of this whole day. The music began, low strings drifting from the quartet in the garden. Tessa rose to her feet, heart pounding not with fear, but anticipation. As she stepped out, the crowd stood. But her eyes found only one person. Maddox stood at the altar in a tailored ink blue suit, his expression unreadable at first. Then he saw her, and something in his posture softened like the tension had drained from his body all at once. Her steps were slow, careful, but sure. Each one brought her closer to the man who had looked at her without expectation, who had never tried to change her, who had simply made space for her. When she reached him, Maddox took her hand. His fingers were warm, but his grip was firm, grounded. He didn't speak until the officiant nodded for them to begin their vows. He didn't pull out a sheet of paper. He didn't need to. I've built towers and companies, he said quietly, only for her. But nothing I've ever created holds a candle to the life I want to build with you. Not because you need saving, but because you taught me what it means to stay. I didn't know what home was until I saw the way you hold your daughter's hand when she's scared, or the way you laugh without apology. I want to live in that world every day. Tessa's hands trembled slightly as she began. I never thought I'd trust someone again. Not fully. Not with everything. But you didn't ask me to. You showed me. You were patient when I was cautious, steady when I was scattered, and kind when I didn't know how to ask for help. You made space for my daughter and never once treated her like an afterthought. That's more than love. That's devotion. And I choose you with all the mess, all the magic, and all the Mondays still to come. The officiant said something, but Tessa barely heard it. All she knew was the moment Maddox slid the ring onto her finger, her world shifted into place. And when he kissed her, it was not the kind of kiss that left her breathless. It was the kind that made her breathe easier. Later, under the canopy of stars and chandeliers strung through the garden trees, Tessa leaned against Maddox's shoulder, watching Lila spin barefoot in the grass with Liam, who had already lost his bow tie and 2 buttons. He looked down at her. You're quiet. I'm happy, she said simply. Then I've done my job. She turned to face him. About that. Are you ever gonna slow down? Or do billionaires not believe in breaks? I already made the biggest investment of my life, he said, brushing her hair back. And I'm not looking for another venture. She tilted her head. What's that supposed to mean? I married you. The return on that's going to be better than any market. She laughed, pressing her face to his chest. You're unbelievable. And you're mine. He guided her to the edge of the dance floor as a soft jazz number began to play. They moved together slowly, the rest of the world fading into background noise. His hand rested gently on her lower back, guiding her through each step like a promise. Do you ever think about what comes next? She asked. Every day. But I'm not rushing it. Tessa looked up at him. I'm thinking of going back to school. For writing. His mouth curved into a quiet smile. Then we'll find you the best program. And I'll help with Lila so you can write. You'd really do that? I already have a space cleared in the study. Just waiting for you to use it. She blinked. You planned that. I told you. I remember everything you say. The rest of the evening passed in the kind of blur reserved for nights that become memories. Toasts were made. Laughter rang across the lawn. And Maddox surprised them all with a fireworks display that lit up the night sky in bursts of gold and violet. By the time the last guest had gone and Liam was asleep on one of the velvet settees in the lounge, Maddox carried Lila in his arms, her head tucked against his shoulder. Tessa walked beside him barefoot now, her heels dangling from one hand as they moved through the quiet house. Inside the master suite, Maddox laid Lila gently in the bed they'd prepared in the adjoining room. Tessa watched from the doorway as he knelt beside her, pulled the blanket to her chin, and kissed her forehead. Good night, sunshine, he murmured. She closed the door behind them softly. When they reached the bedroom, Maddox wrapped his arms around her from behind. This is it, he said. It is. Her voice was quiet, and I wouldn't change a single thing. He turned her in his arms, kissed her deeply, then carried her to bed, laughter and love folding around them like the softest sheet. The next morning, the sunlight spilled through the windows and Tessa woke to the sound of birdsong and the scent of fresh coffee. Downstairs, Maddox had made breakfast nothing extravagant, just pancakes shaped like stars and a note tucked beside the plate that said, "For the author of my heart." She smiled, picked up the journal from the counter, and flipped to the first page. And there, in neat handwriting, Maddox had already written the title, Our Beginning.